It all started with something so small that I almost ignored it. A simple mistake. A misstep. A single message on my wife's phone that made my stomach drop, though I told myself I was overreacting. It was a Thursday evening, just like any other. I had come home from work exhausted, the weight of the day dragging me down. Janice, my wife, was in the kitchen preparing dinner, humming to herself. Our 2 kids, Ryan and Sean, were playing in the family room, their laughter echoing through the house. Everything seemed normal, too normal. I tossed my keys onto the counter and walked past the dining table when something caught my eye. Janice's phone was sitting face up, screen lit, a notification flashing from a name I didn't recognize, RM. That was it, just 2 initials. I wouldn't have thought anything of it except for the preview message beneath it. Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you. My blood ran cold. I stopped in my tracks, my mind struggling to process what I had just seen. My first instinct was denial. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe it was an old friend, an inside joke, something innocent. But deep down, something inside me cracked. I glanced toward the kitchen, where Janice was stirring a pot, her back to me. She had no idea I was standing there, frozen, my heart hammering in my chest. Carefully, I stepped closer to the phone. I knew it would lock soon, and if I missed this chance, I might never get it again. My fingers hovered over the screen for just a second before I swiped up, hoping to see more. Locked. Damn it. I exhaled slowly, steadying my breath. This wasn't the time to panic, not yet. I had no proof, no context, no idea what I was looking at. But that single message had already planted a seed of doubt deep inside me, one that I knew wouldn't go away without answers. Jim. Janice's voice snapped me out of my daze. I turned quickly, trying to look normal as she peeked around the corner. Dinner's almost ready. Can you get the boys to wash up? I nodded, forcing a smile. Yeah, of course. She smiled back, completely unaware that my world had just tilted on its axis. As I called Ryan and Sean over to the sink, my mind raced. I had always trusted Janice. We had been married for 7 years, built a life together. She was a devoted mother, a loving wife, or at least I had always believed so. But now, one single message had cracked that belief. I needed to know more. That night, after the kids were asleep and Janice was in the shower, I sat up in bed, my heart pounding as I picked up her phone from the nightstand. Still locked. I needed her password. She had changed it a few months ago, something about security, but I hadn't thought much of it at the time. Now I wished I had paid attention. I took a deep breath and tried a few obvious choices. Our wedding date. The kids' birthdays. Nothing worked. Then I thought about what she cared about most these days. Sean. I typed in his name, followed by his birth year. The phone unlocked. My stomach twisted into knots. I didn't know what I was expecting. Maybe to find nothing, maybe to confirm I was just paranoid. But what I found made my hands tremble. A thread of messages between Janice and RM. Randy. I can't wait to see you again. Last weekend was unforgettable. I miss your touch. I swallowed hard, bile rising in my throat. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't some old friend. This was an affair. And my wife had been lying to me for God knows how long. I put the phone down slowly, my breath shaky. I could hear the shower still running in the bathroom. Janice was just a few feet away, blissfully unaware that I had just uncovered her secret. I had 2 choices. I could confront her now, demand answers, let my rage take over. Or I could wait. Watch. Gather proof. Make sure that when I finally exposed her, there would be no way for her to lie her way out of it. I clenched my fists, my jaw tightening. I wasn't going to act on impulse. No. I was going to be smart about this. I was going to find out everything. And when the time was right, I was going to make her pay. I barely slept that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning with 1,000 questions. How long had this been going on? Who else knew? Had she ever thought about leaving me? Was Sean even my son? Janice slept peacefully beside me, completely unaware that the walls of her carefully crafted deception were beginning to crumble. I turned my head slightly to look at her. In the dim light of our bedroom, she looked the same as she always had. My wife, the mother of my children. But she wasn't the same. Not anymore. I had seen the messages. I had seen her words, her confessions of longing for another man. The woman lying next to me wasn't who I thought she was. I needed more than just texts. I needed proof, undeniable, irrefutable proof. The next morning, I woke up early, pretending to be my usual self. If I acted differently, she'd suspect something. I greeted the kids, kissed Janice on the cheek, and forced myself to eat breakfast even though my stomach churned with disgust. She smiled at me over her coffee. "You look tired. Did you sleep okay?" I forced a chuckle. "Not really. Long day at work yesterday." She nodded, completely oblivious. As she got the kids ready for daycare, I grabbed my phone and quickly did what I should have done weeks ago. I checked our shared cell phone bill. Janice and I had always used a family plan, so I had access to her call and text logs. I scrolled through, my pulse racing. One number kept appearing over and over again. Randy. She had been texting and calling him daily, sometimes in the middle of the night when she thought I was asleep. Some calls lasted a few minutes, some over an hour. I clenched my jaw. This wasn't just a fling. This was something deeper. And the worst part? She wasn't even trying that hard to hide it. The texts were right there, the number easily traceable. That meant one of two things. Either she thought I was too stupid to ever check, or she no longer cared if I found out. Both possibilities made my stomach turn. The first step. I needed more than just phone records. I needed to know where she went, who she met, how far this had gone. That morning, instead of heading straight to work, I made a detour to an electronics store. I bought a GPS tracker, one small enough to fit discreetly inside her car. It was easy to install, tucked away beneath the dashboard where she'd never find it. I wasn't just going to confront her with accusations. I was going to follow her. As I drove to work, I thought about my next move. I needed a plan, one that would keep me in control. If I exploded with rage too soon, she'd twist it around, play the victim, and deny everything. I had to wait. Be patient. Make sure that when I finally made my move, she wouldn't have anywhere to run. At lunch, I made another call, this time to a private investigator. "Sam Ridley Investigations," a voice answered. "How can we help you?" "I need to confirm if my wife is cheating," I said bluntly. The woman on the other end of the line didn't sound surprised. "We handle a lot of cases like that. Do you have any information on her schedule, a suspected affair partner, anything that could help?" I exhaled, gripping the phone. "Yes. I have a name, a phone number, and some messages. And in 3 days, she's going on a weekend trip. I need someone to follow her." There was a short pause. "We can make that happen. Come by our office tomorrow to go over the details." I agreed, hung up, and leaned back in my chair. Step 1. Track her movements. Step 2. Gather irrefutable proof. Step 3. Decide how far I was willing to go. A small slip-up. That evening, Janice came home in a great mood. She kissed me on the cheek like nothing was wrong, played with the kids, and laughed at dinner. I forced myself to act normal. As we cleaned up after the meal, she casually mentioned her upcoming trip. "Carla and I are so excited for this weekend," she said. "We need a little break." I wiped my hands on a towel, forcing a smile. "Yeah, you guys always have fun in Chicago." She nodded, her eyes sparkling. "It's just nice to get away for a bit, you know? Recharge." Recharge. That's what she called it. I clenched my fists under the table. "Oh, by the way," she added, "can you send me some extra money for the trip? Just a couple hundred. I need to pick up a few things while I'm there." I nearly laughed. She wanted my money to fund a weekend with him. But I played along. "Sure. I'll transfer it tomorrow." She beamed and kissed me again. "You're the best." I smiled back, but inside, my rage burned hotter than ever. I didn't just want proof anymore. I wanted revenge. I spent the next day setting everything in motion. I met with the private investigator, Sam Ridley, at his downtown office. It was a plain, no-nonsense space, with a desk stacked high with case files and a coffee machine that smelled like it had been running non-stop for years. Sam was a stocky man in his 50s, with sharp eyes that had seen more betrayals than I ever wanted to imagine. "So, you suspect your wife is cheating," he said, leaning back in his chair. I nodded. "I don't just suspect it. I know." I showed him the messages, the phone logs, and told him about her upcoming trip. He listened, nodding occasionally, but his expression never changed. "We'll tail her," he said finally. "We'll track her movements, get photographic evidence, and confirm if she's meeting this Randy guy. You'll have everything you need." "How much?" I asked. "For a weekend job like this, plus video and photography, $2,500. I didn't even flinch. "Done." We finalized the details. He'd have his guys at the airport, tail her to the hotel, and keep a close watch the entire weekend. I'd get updates in real time. By the time I left Sam's office, my head was buzzing. This was real. No more suspicions. No more wondering. By Sunday night, I would know the full truth. And then I would decide what to do with it. Watching and waiting. That evening, I kept playing my role as the clueless husband. Janice was in a fantastic mood. She hummed while making dinner, joked with the kids, and even cuddled up next to me on the couch. If I hadn't seen those messages, if I didn't know what I knew, I would have thought we were just another happy family. But now every smile, every touch, every laugh felt like a lie. I needed space. "I think I'm coming down with something," I said, rubbing my forehead. "I'm gonna head to bed early." She frowned. "You've been looking tired lately. Maybe you should take it easy." I nodded. "Yeah, maybe." I didn't go to bed. Once I was sure she was asleep, I snuck downstairs, grabbed my laptop, and opened the GPS trackers app. Her car was parked safely in the garage, of course. But tomorrow, when she left the house, I'd be watching. I clicked over to her email. She hadn't changed her password. Big mistake. Scrolling through her inbox, I found exactly what I was looking for. An email from Randy. "Can't wait to see you. Same hotel, same room. Counting down the hours." I stared at the screen, my hands gripping the laptop so tightly my knuckles turned white. Same hotel. Same room. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't some emotional affair. This was routine. How many times had she done this before? How many years had she been lying to my face? I closed the laptop and sat in the dark, my mind racing. This wasn't just about cheating anymore. This was about who she really was. And I was about to find out. The day of the trip. Friday morning came faster than I wanted it to. Janice packed her bags, humming as she moved around the room. "I'm going to miss you guys," she said sweetly. "But it'll be nice to relax for a bit." I forced a smile. "You deserve it." She kissed me, and for the first time in our marriage, I felt nothing. At noon, Carla pulled up, honking from the driveway. Janice grabbed her bags, gave me one last peck on the cheek, and said, "I'll call you when we land." I nodded, watching her walk out the door. I followed her to the window, watching as she tossed her suitcase in the trunk and slid into the passenger seat. She was laughing. Happy. Excited. For him. As soon as they drove off, I went back inside, pulled out my phone, and checked the GPS tracker. Her car was moving. I watched as the little blue dot traced its way toward the airport. I texted Sam. "She's on her way." He responded immediately. "We're in position. We'll follow." I exhaled slowly, my hands shaking. This was it. The trap was set. By Sunday night, she would walk back through that front door thinking everything was the same. She had no idea her entire world was about to collapse. And I was going to be the one to tear it down. The drive to the airport took 30 minutes. I watched on my phone as the GPS tracker moved along the route, following the little blue that represented my wife's car. The investigator, Sam, sent me a quick message confirming they were in place. Everything was going according to plan. I sat on the couch, phone in hand, waiting. It felt strange, knowing that at this very moment, Janice was still thinking I was at home, clueless, playing the perfect husband. It made me sick. About an hour later, my phone vibrated again. "She's at the terminal. We've got eyes on her." I closed my eyes and exhaled. I had told myself that maybe, just maybe, I was wrong. Maybe she wasn't meeting Randy. Maybe she really was just taking a trip with her sister. But then another message came through. She's met up with the guy. They just checked in for the same flight. I clenched my jaw, gripping the phone so tightly my fingers ached. There it was. The undeniable truth. For a moment, I felt lightheaded, like the air had been knocked out of me. Even after everything I had discovered, the messages, the calls, the hotel reservations, some part of me had still wanted to believe in her. In us. But now, that part of me was dead. I didn't reply to Sam's message. I just stared at the screen, my mind racing. Janice and Randy were about to board a plane together, heading off to their secret weekend getaway. While I was at home, taking care of our kids, keeping up the illusion of a happy marriage, she was walking through an airport, laughing with her lover. I swallowed hard, trying to keep the rage from boiling over. This wasn't the time to lose control. I needed to stick to the plan. I needed to see everything. Later that night, Sam sent me another update. They arrived at the hotel. Checked in together. Got the key for the same room. We have pictures. Pictures. Proof. It was almost surreal. I opened the photos he sent and felt my stomach turn. There she was, standing next to Randy at the hotel reception, her body angled slightly toward him in a way that told me everything I needed to know. She looked happy. Relaxed. The next picture showed them walking down the hallway together, his hand on the small of her back. The final photo was the worst, Janice unlocking the door to their room while Randy stood close behind her, his hand resting on her hip. I put the phone down, my hands shaking. She had walked into that hotel room knowing exactly what she was about to do. My mind flashed back to all the nights she had come home from these weekend trips, kissing me as if nothing had happened, tucking our kids into bed, lying in our bed like she hadn't just spent 2 days screwing another man. I felt sick. 4 hours, I sat in the dark, staring at nothing. At some point, I realized I hadn't eaten all day. My body was exhausted, but I couldn't sleep. I needed to know more. I pulled up her email again, looking for anything else I might have missed. There it was. Another email from Randy. Looking forward to finally having you all to myself again. I'll make sure this weekend is unforgettable. Unforgettable. She had probably been counting down the days for this. I wondered if she had been thinking of him while lying next to me in bed, smiling at me across the dinner table, pretending to be the devoted wife and mother. My hand clenched into a fist. I had spent the last 7 years believing I was married to someone who loved me. Now, I didn't even recognize her. I didn't know how long I sat there, staring at that email. But at some point, my phone vibrated again. Sam's message was brief. They just turned out the lights. We're wrapping up for the night. I stared at those words for a long time. She was in that hotel room, with him, right now. I could picture it so clearly. Her body tangled with his. The way she probably whispered his name in the dark, the same way she used to whisper mine. I gritted my teeth, forcing the image out of my mind. This wasn't the time to fall apart. Tomorrow, I'd have more proof. More pictures. More confirmation of just how deep this betrayal ran. And then, when she came home, smiling and pretending like nothing had happened, I'd be ready. I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to destroy her lies completely. And she wouldn't even see it coming. The weekend felt like an eternity. Every time my phone buzzed, my pulse spiked, expecting another update from Sam. Each message confirmed what I already knew but still sent fresh waves of nausea through me. Saturday morning, they had breakfast together in the hotel restaurant. Holding hands. Saturday afternoon, they spent a few hours shopping, then returned to the hotel. More photos attached. Saturday night, they just ordered room service. They're in for the night. I barely ate. Barely slept. Every minute she spent in that hotel room with Randy felt like another knife to the gut. By Sunday morning, I was numb. The last message from Sam came just after noon. They're checking out now. Heading to the airport. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to stay calm. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for. By the time her car pulled into the driveway that evening, I was sitting in the living room, waiting. The kids ran to the door to greet her, their excited voices filling the air. She stepped inside, suitcase in hand, wearing the same smile she always wore after these trips. "Hey, honey," she said, setting her bag down. "Miss me?" I looked at her carefully, the weight of the truth pressing against my chest. I had missed her once. But not anymore. Chapter 6. I forced a smile as Janice walked into the house, her arms wrapping around me in what used to be a comforting embrace. But now, it felt hollow, meaningless. I could still smell the hotel shampoo in her hair, the same scent she'd probably washed off after spending the weekend in another man's bed. I clenched my jaw, resisting the urge to push her away. This wasn't the time to confront her. Not yet. "Of course, I missed you," I lied. "How was the trip?" She beamed, her eyes bright with excitement. "Oh, it was great. Carla and I had such a good time. We did some shopping, saw a show, just relaxed." Relaxed. That was the word she always used. I nodded, pretending to be interested. "Sounds fun." As we sat down for dinner, I watched her closely. She was completely at ease, laughing with the kids, chatting about her trip as if nothing had happened. As if she hadn't just spent 2 days wrapped around another man. It made me sick. I forced myself to eat, though every bite tasted like sand. At one point, she reached across the table, placing her hand over mine. "I really missed you, you know." I looked at her, searching for any sign of guilt, any flicker of hesitation. But there was none. She was a master at this. She had done it so many times before, she didn't even need to think about it. I squeezed her hand lightly, playing my role. "I missed you too." Inside, I was counting down the hours until I would finally expose her lies. Chapter 7. That night, as she lay next to me in bed, I barely moved. I listened to her breathing, even and steady, as she drifted off to sleep without a care in the world. I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. Tomorrow, I would take the next step. I had already gathered enough proof, the messages, the emails, the GPS tracker, and the photos from the investigator. I had everything I needed to shatter the illusion she had so carefully built. The only question left was how I wanted to do it. Part of me wanted to explode, to throw the evidence in her face and demand answers. But another part of me wanted to be more methodical, to expose her in a way she couldn't deny or manipulate her way out of. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she had done. I turned over and looked at her, peaceful and content in her sleep. Tomorrow, I would ruin that peace forever. Chapter 8. I woke up early, my plan set. After Janice left to drop the kids at school, I called Bob, Carla's husband. I had debated whether to tell him, but in the end, he deserved to know. He picked up on the third ring. "Hey, Jim. What's up?" I took a deep breath. "We need to talk. It's about Janice and Carla." There was a pause. "What do you mean?" "I have proof," I said firmly. "They weren't in Chicago for just a girls' trip. They were with someone. I have pictures, messages, everything." Silence. When Bob finally spoke, his voice was hollow. "Come over." I grabbed the folder of evidence and drove to his house. When I arrived, he looked pale, like he already knew what I was about to tell him. I handed him the photos. Watched as he flipped through them. His hands started shaking. "That's Mark," he muttered. That's her boss." I clenched my jaw. "Randy's married too." Bob exhaled sharply, rubbing his face. "Jesus Christ. How long?" "At least 4 years," I said. "Since they started taking these trips." He slammed his fist onto the table, his face contorted with anger and pain. "Are you confronting her?" he asked. I nodded. "Tonight." He looked at me, his jaw tightening. "I'm coming with you." Chapter 9. That evening, I set the stage. I invited Bob and Carla over for dinner. Janice was thrilled, completely unaware of what was coming. I played my role perfectly, laughing, smiling, acting as if nothing had changed. Bob did the same, though I could see the tension in his eyes. When dinner was finished, I leaned back in my chair. "Jan, Carla," I said casually, "there's something we want to show you." Janice looked at me curiously. "What is it?" I reached under the table and pulled out the folder, tossing it onto the table in front of them. "Go ahead," I said. "Take a look." Janice's smile faltered. Carla frowned, reaching for the folder. The moment they saw the photos, the color drained from their faces. Carla gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Janice just stared, frozen. Bob's voice was cold. "Explain." Janice opened her mouth, but no words came out. Carla started shaking her head. "It's not what it looks like." "Don't," I snapped. "Don't insult our intelligence. We know everything." Silence. I saw the moment Janice realized she had nowhere to run. Tears welled in her eyes. "Jim, please." I laughed bitterly. "Please what? Please pretend like I don't know? Like you haven't been lying to me for years." She broke down, sobbing. Carla did too. Bob stood up abruptly. "I can't do this," he muttered, storming out. Carla ran after him, pleading. Janice fell to her knees, gripping my hands. "Jim, I love you. I never wanted to hurt you." I pulled my hands away. "You already did." She sobbed harder. "I'll do anything. I'll fix this." I stared at her, the woman I had once loved more than anything. "You can't fix this," I said quietly. I turned and walked out, leaving her kneeling on the floor, broken. Tomorrow, I would file for divorce. She had already destroyed our marriage. Now, I was just making it official. Chapter 10. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the darkness of the guest room, staring at the ceiling, listening to the muffled sounds of Janice crying in the next room. The weight of everything pressed down on me. 7 years of marriage, 2 children, a life built on trust that had been shattered in an instant. My mind replayed the confrontation over and over, the way her face had gone pale when she saw the photos, the way she had fallen to her knees, begging for forgiveness. Part of me wanted to feel something, anger, satisfaction, even pity. But I felt nothing. Just emptiness. At some point in the early hours of the morning, my phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. Bob. I answered on the first ring. "You okay?" His voice was rough, exhausted. "No," I admitted. "Me neither," he muttered. There was a long pause before he continued. "Carla's gone." I sat up. "What do you mean?" "She packed a bag and left. Said she'd stay with her sister for a while. I don't know if she's coming back." I exhaled. "Maybe that's for the best." "Yeah." He let out a bitter laugh. "And Janice?" "She's still here," I said. "Crying." "Are you going through with it?" I didn't even hesitate. "Yeah." "I'm calling the lawyer in the morning." Bob sighed. "Guess I'll be doing the same." We sat in silence for a moment, both of us absorbing the reality of what was happening. "Talk tomorrow?" he finally asked. "Yeah." I hung up and lay back down. Tomorrow, everything would change. Chapter 11. I left early, before Janice even woke up. The kids were still asleep, and I didn't want to wake them. I kissed them both on the forehead, lingering for a moment longer than usual, before grabbing my keys and heading out. The drive to Sam Ridley's office was quiet. The streets were mostly empty, the world still waking up. It felt fitting, like I was at the edge of something new. When I arrived, Sam greeted me with a grim nod. "You ready?" I nodded. "Let's do it." He pulled out a thick folder and slid it across the desk. "I've already drafted the divorce papers based on what we discussed. You'll get primary custody of the kids. She won't be entitled to anything financially since you have proof of infidelity." I flipped through the papers, scanning the legal jargon. It was all there, everything I needed to formally end my marriage. I picked up the pen and signed. Just like that, 7 years came to an end. Sam took the papers and nodded. "We'll serve her later today." I exhaled. "Thanks." As I drove home, I tried to process what I had just done. But instead of feeling relief, or sadness, or even anger, I just felt empty. Like I was starting over from scratch. Chapter 12. When I got home, Janice was sitting at the kitchen table, staring blankly at her coffee. She looked up when I walked in. Her eyes were red and swollen, her face pale. "Where did you go?" I sat across from her, placing the folder on the table. "I went to see a lawyer." Her breath hitched. "No. Jim, please." I held up a hand. "It's done, Janice. I signed the papers this morning." Tears spilled down her cheeks. Please, don't do this. We can fix this. I love you. I sighed, looking at her, really looking at her. This woman, who I had built a life with. The mother of my children. The person I had trusted above all else. I don't believe that, I said quietly. She sobbed harder. I made a mistake. I clenched my jaw. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is losing your temper. What you did. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. She shook her head desperately. I was stupid. Selfish. I wasn't thinking. But I never stopped loving you. I leaned forward, my voice low. You planned those trips. You booked the same hotel room every year. You made sure I never found out. That wasn't stupidity, Janice. That was deception. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. What about the kids? She whispered. They'll be with me, I said firmly. You'll get visitation. Her head snapped up. You can't do that. Yes, I can. I tapped the folder. And I did. Legally, you don't have a leg to stand on. She collapsed against the table, crying uncontrollably. I stood up. You need to find somewhere else to stay. I'll give you a few days, but after that, I want you gone. She didn't argue. She just nodded, defeated. I walked away, leaving her there. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could finally breathe. Epilogue. The divorce was finalized in less than 6 months. Janice moved out a few weeks after the confrontation. She rented a small apartment across town and saw the kids on weekends. She tried to reconcile, even after the papers were signed, but I never gave her another chance. Bob followed through with his divorce too. Carla fought it, but in the end, she had no choice. He got custody of Melissa. As for Randy and Mark, their lives fell apart. Their wives both divorced them, taking half of everything. From what I heard, Randy lost his job too. Turns out his wife had connections in his industry. Poetic justice. And me. I never remarried. For a long time, I thought about dating, but something in me had changed. Trust wasn't something I could give freely anymore. Instead, I focused on my kids, on rebuilding my life. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't angry. I was just done. Some betrayals cut too deep to ever fully heal. And sometimes, moving on doesn't mean finding someone new. Sometimes, it just means finding yourself again. Chapter 13. Life after the divorce was quiet. Almost too quiet. For the first few weeks, the house felt empty without Janice there. Even though I had no love left for her, her absence was a constant reminder of what had happened. The kids adjusted faster than I did. Ryan, being 5, sensed something was different but didn't fully understand. Sean, being only 2, was too young to notice much of anything. Janice saw them every weekend. The first few visits were tense, mostly because she still tried to talk to me, to plead for another chance. I never engaged. I dropped the kids off, picked them up, and avoided conversation. She sent emails. Long, emotional ones about how sorry she was, how she wished she could take it all back, how she loved me and the kids. I read them, but I never responded. One night, I sat at my laptop staring at another one of her messages. This one was different. She didn't beg for another chance. Instead, she admitted that she had been selfish, that she had thrown away something good. I never thought I'd lose you, Jim. I thought I was too good at hiding it. That's what makes me sick. I wasn't sorry until I got caught. And now, I have to live with that. I closed the email and never read another one from her again. Chapter 14. Work became my escape. I buried myself in it, picking up extra projects, staying late at the office. It kept my mind busy, kept me from dwelling on what had happened. Bob and I kept in touch. We met for drinks once a week, talking about everything except our ex-wives. Carla had tried to get back with him, much like Janice had with me. He shot her down every time. She's still texting me, he admitted one night. Janice too, I said. We both took a drink, neither of us saying much after that. It was strange. We had both been blindsided in the worst way, and yet there was no real satisfaction in seeing our ex-wives regret their choices. The damage had already been done. One evening, after dropping the kids off at my parents' house for the night, I found myself sitting alone at the kitchen table. I should have felt free. Instead, I just felt tired. For years, I had believed in something that wasn't real. I had built my life around a lie. And now, I was starting over. But where was I supposed to start? Chapter 15. I started dating again a year after the divorce. It wasn't serious at first, just casual dinners, conversations, testing the waters. But no matter how many dates I went on, no matter how many wonderful women I met, I never felt ready. Every time I got close, I found myself pulling back. The trust wasn't there. I wasn't the same person I had been before. Janice had taken that part of me, and I wasn't sure if I'd ever get it back. One night, after another unsuccessful date, I sat in my car outside my house, staring at the darkened windows. I had everything I needed: my kids, my job, my independence. But was I happy? I wasn't sure. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I was just existing. And maybe, for now, that was enough. Chapter 16. Years passed. The scars remained, but they didn't define me anymore. Ryan grew into a smart, kind-hearted teenager. Sean, despite everything, never questioned his place in my life. I had never told him the truth about his real father, and I never would. He was my son. That was all that mattered. Janice remarried 5 years after our divorce. I heard about it through mutual friends. I didn't feel anything when I found out. Carla's marriage to Bob had never recovered. They co-parented, but that was it. As for me, I never remarried. Not because I was bitter, not because I didn't believe in love. I just didn't need it. I had my kids, my life, my peace. That was enough. And for the first time in a long time, I was truly happy. The end.